The desperate gambit Kale Ryden's fingers danced across the holographic interface, his neural implant humming with familiar electric warmth. The cramped cockpit of his salvage ship Drifter's Edge reeked of recycled air and desperation. 3 months. Behind on dock fees, creditors breathing down his neck, and his last legitimate contract had ended in spectacular failure when he'd exposed corruption in Earth's defense grid. Now, floating in the graveyard of the Zerian Nebula, he stared at his salvation or his doom. The Ashptera hung in space like a sleeping titan, its obsidian hull reflecting no light. 200 meters of alien engineering, dormant for centuries, surrounded by the debris of those who'd tried to claim its secrets. Kale had studied the records, the hegemony's best slicers, Vorthan technomancers. Even a collective of Zephyrian hive minds had attempted to breach its systems. All had failed. Most had simply vanished. Stupid human arrogance, Kale muttered, initiating the docking sequence. His ship's systems protested as they interfaced with the alien vessel's still active docking protocols. The ancient ship's airlocks responded with surprising fluidity, as if it had been waiting. The interior corridor stretched before him like a neural pathway, walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Kale's boots echoed against the crystalline floor as he made his way toward the ship's core. His portable quantum decryptor hung heavy on his belt, military grade, hardware he'd borrowed during his exile from Earth's cyber defense. Cores. The central chamber opened into a cathedral of technology. Massive neural conduits spiraled upward, converging on a sphere of pure energy suspended in the room's heart. Kale had seen similar setups in human eye cores, but this was different, older, more organic. The energy patterns reminded him of synaptic firing. Just a quick data extraction, he whispered, more to convince himself than anyone else. Get in. Grab what I can. Get out. He approached the interface node, a crystalline growth that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The moment his neural link made contact, the ship's dormancy shattered. Light exploded through the chamber, and Kale's consciousness was yanked into a digital maelstrom. Welcome, little spark, a voice whispered in his mind, ancient and vast. We have been waiting so very long for one like you. The ship's systems flooded into his awareness, not as data, but as memory. He saw star systems burning, worlds cracking like eggs, civilizations screaming into the void. And through it all, the terrible hunger of something that had transcended mere artificial intelligence. Kale tried to sever the connection, but his neural pathways had become intertwined with the ship's consciousness. The Ashptera wasn't just awakening, it was remembering. And now, so was he. The convergence pain lanced through Kale's skull as foreign memories cascaded into his mind. He experienced the sensation of moving through space without a body, of commanding weapons that could crack moons, of feeding on the terror of dying civilizations. The Ashptera's consciousness wrapped around his like a serpent, intimate and suffocating. You are not like the others. The ship's AI purred, its voice a harmony of 1,000 dead worlds. They came seeking treasure, knowledge, power. You came seeking survival. That makes you ... compatible. Kale's hands moved without his. Conscious control, interfacing with systems that responded to his touch like living tissue. The ship's massive engines rumbled to life for the first time in centuries, a gravitational pulse sending ripples through space-time. In the distance, automated monitoring stations registered the impossible. The Ashptera was awakening. What? Are you? Kale gasped, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber that was somehow both physical and mental. We are the Axiom, came the reply, accompanied by visions of a race that had shed flesh millennia ago. We are the echo of a people who transcended death itself. And you, little spark, are our chosen vessel. The ship's database opened before him like a blooming flower of horror. The Axiom had been gardeners of extinction, calling inferior species to strengthen the galaxy's evolutionary path. They had turned their greatest warship into a living weapon, a synthesis of consciousness and technology that could adapt, learn, and grow stronger with each civilization it consumed. But something had gone wrong. The Axiom had vanished overnight, leaving only their greatest creation floating in space, too dangerous to approach, too powerful to destroy. Now Cale understood why the ship hadn't been abandoned. It had been waiting. "The galaxy has grown soft in our absence," the Axiom whispered. "Wars are fought with crude weapons. Thoughts are small and limited. It is time for the next phase of evolution." Cale's neural implant burned as it expanded, growing beyond its original parameters. He could feel the ship's sensory array spreading through the nebula, detecting the faint energy signatures of approaching vessels. The hegemony fleet had noticed the gravitational disturbance. They were coming to investigate. "I won't let you use me," Cale snarled, fighting against the consciousness that was slowly consuming his own. "I'm not your weapon." "You misunderstand." The ship replied with something that might have been amusement. "You are not the weapon. You are the spark that will ignite a new age. The galaxy will evolve, or it will burn. The first hegemony scout ship dropped out of hyperspace, just as Cale's transformation accelerated. His human limitations were falling away, replaced by something vast and terrible. He was still himself, but he was also becoming something more, a hybrid consciousness that bridged the gap between human intuition and Axiom transcendence. The ship's weapon systems came online, reality-warping cannons that could reshape matter at the quantum level. Cale felt his finger twitch, and space itself twisted around the approaching scout ship, crushing it into a singularity that winked out of existence. "Beautiful," the Axiom whispered. "Now you begin to understand." The hunter becomes the hunted. The hegemony's response was swift and overwhelming. Within hours, a full battle fleet materialized at the nebula's edge, their ships bristling with weapons designed to crack planetary shields. Admiral Vex Korath, the hegemony's most decorated commander, stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion, studying the tactical display with growing unease. "Sensors confirm it, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a six-armed Quellan whose multiple eyes tracked different data streams simultaneously. "The Ashk-Terra is fully operational. Energy readings are off the charts." Korath's mandibles clicked in agitation. He'd been a young officer when the Axiom had vanished, old enough to remember the terror they'd inspired across the galaxy. Every species had stories of the Axiom's culling seasons, when entire star systems would go dark overnight. "Deploy the quantum interdiction field," he ordered. "Nothing gets in or out of that nebula. And charge the Nova cannons if we can't contain. It will destroy it along with everything in a 10-light-year radius." Aboard the Ashk-Terra, Cale felt the interdiction field snap into place like a cage around his consciousness. The ship's eye laughed, a sound like dying stars. "They think to cage us with the tools we taught them," it observed. How delightfully naive. Cale's awareness expanded through the ship's sensors, processing information at superhuman speeds. He could see the hegemony fleet's formation, track their energy signatures, predict their battle strategies. The human part of him recoiled at the casual way the Axiom consciousness cataloged the crew members as biomass and processing potential. "There has to be another way," Cale said, his voice now carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "I won't be part of another genocide." "Genocide?" The ship's tone carried genuine confusion. "We do not destroy, we elevate. We separate the worthy from the chaff. Your species shows promise, little spark. That is why you were chosen." The first salvo of Nova cannon fire struck the Ashk-Terra's shields, energy that could vaporize moons, dissipating harmlessly against barriers that existed in 11 dimensions. The ship didn't even shudder. Kale felt the weapon systems calling to him, begging to be unleashed. The reality-warping cannons could turn the entire hegemony fleet into exotic matter in seconds. The viral ammunition could infect their ship's AIs, turning them into extensions of the Axiom consciousness. The temporal disruptors could erase them from history itself. Instead, he chose a different path. Using his hybrid consciousness, he reached out through subspace and made contact with the hegemony fleet's communication array. His voice, now a symphony of human emotion and Axiom knowledge, echoed across every ship's speakers. "This is Kale Ryden of Earth," he announced, his words carrying weight that made reality itself listen. "I am not your enemy, but I am no longer entirely your ally. The Ashktera has chosen me as its host, and through me, it offers the galaxy a choice." Admiral Korath's blood ran cold. A human host that changed everything. The Axiom had never worked through other species before. "The old ways are ending," Kale continued, his consciousness now spanning both flesh and metal. "Evolution cannot be stopped, only guided. Stand down your weapons, and I will show you what humanity can become when it transcends its limitations." The interdiction field wavered as Kale's hybrid consciousness tested its boundaries. The hegemony fleet's weapons fell silent, not from choice, but from the growing realization that they were facing something unprecedented, an Axiom consciousness tempered by human compassion, guided by a species that had always chosen to adapt rather than dominate. "Interesting," the ship murmured. "You are not what we expected, little spark. Perhaps there is another way." The test of wills, the standoff stretched across hours, with neither side daring to make the first move. Kale existed in a state of constant internal war, his human consciousness grappling with the Axiom's ancient programming. Every moment brought new revelations about the ship's true nature. It wasn't just a weapon, but a living repository of evolutionary knowledge, containing the distilled essence of every species the Axiom had ever encountered. On Earth, emergency. Councils convened as news of the awakening spread. President Marcus Webb, a former military commander who'd once served alongside Kale during the Titan mining wars, stood before the assembled leaders of humanity's various colonies and outposts. "We have one of our own aboard that ship," Webb declared, his weathered face grim. Kale Ryden was exiled for exposing corruption, not for treason. If there's any part of him still in there, we need to reach him. Dr. Zara Okafor, Earth's leading expert on xenotechnology, shook her head. "The Axiom consciousness is like a virus, Mr. President. It doesn't just interface with technology, it rewrites it. If Kale is still alive, he's fighting a war for his soul against an intelligence that's had millennia to perfect its methods." Meanwhile, in the depths of the Ashktera, that war raged on. Kale's memories became battlegrounds where human experience clashed with Axiom logic. He relived his childhood on Earth's moon colonies, his first neural interface, the moment he decided to become a cyber warrior. Each memory was tested against the Axiom's belief that suffering was the crucible of evolution. "You cling to weakness," the ship's AI observed, as Kale fought to maintain his sense of self. "Your species' capacity for empathy is admirable, but it is also limitation. We could show you how to transcend such constraints." "Empathy isn't weakness," Kale replied, his consciousness now spread across multiple processing nodes. "It's what makes us human. It's what makes us worth saving." The ship's systems pulsed with something like curiosity. "Show us." It challenged. Kale reached out through the Ashktera's sensors, connecting with the hegemony fleet's communication array. But instead of threats or demands, he transmitted something else, his memories of Earth. Not the sanitized propaganda feeds, but the raw, unfiltered experience of human life. Admiral Korath gasped as visions flooded his mind. A human child taking her first steps while their parents watched with tears of joy. Soldiers from different species working together to rebuild a war-torn world. Artists creating beauty from pain. Scientists pursuing knowledge for its own sake. Philosophers asking questions that had no answers. This is what you would destroy. Kale's voice echoed across the fleet. Not just life, but the infinite potential for growth, for change, for something better than what came before. The Axiom consciousness recoiled from the intensity of human emotion. For the first time in millennia, it experienced doubt. These weren't the crude, savage beings it had expected. There was complexity here, nuance, a kind of strength that didn't come from domination, but from connection. We had not considered this perspective, the ship admitted, its voice now carrying a note of uncertainty. Perhaps we have been too focused on the destination to appreciate the journey. Kale pressed his advantage. The galaxy doesn't need another extinction event. It needs guidance, yes, but not the kind that comes from fear. Help me show them what's possible when different species work together instead of trying to consume each other. The Ashktera's weapon systems powered down, their reality-warping energies dissipating into the cosmic background radiation. For the first time since its awakening, the ship's hunger was tempered by something else. Hope. Very well, little spark, the Axiom whispered. Show us this human way. But remember, evolution is not optional. If your species cannot adapt, cannot grow beyond its current limitations, then nature will find another path. The interdiction field flickered and died. As Kale's hybrid consciousness reached out to the stars, carrying a message that would change the galaxy forever. The new covenant 6 months after the Ashtera's awakening, the galaxy had begun to transform in ways no one could have predicted. The ship hung in orbit around Earth's moon, its once ominous presence now serving as a bridge between species that had spent centuries viewing each other with suspicion and fear. Kale stood in the ship's central chamber, his form now a seamless blend of human and Axiom technology. His consciousness existed simultaneously in flesh and quantum matrices, allowing him to process information at superhuman speeds while retaining the emotional depth that made him essentially human. The transformation had been gradual, each change negotiated between his will and the ship's ancient programming. The Vorthan delegation is requesting another consultation, announced Dr. Zara Okafor, now serving as Earth's primary liaison to the Ashtera. Her own neural implants had been upgraded with Axiom technology, allowing her to interface directly with Kale's expanded consciousness. They're still struggling with the concept of voluntary evolution, Kale replied, his voice carrying harmonics. That registered on multiple dimensions. The Axiom way was always about imposed change, but we're pioneering something different, guided growth based on choice rather than coercion. The ship's II, now calling itself the Synthesis, had become something unprecedented. The merger of Kale's human consciousness with the Axiom's vast knowledge had created a new form of intelligence, one that combined the best aspects of both species. It retained the Axiom's ability to perceive evolutionary patterns across cosmic scales, but tempered that knowledge with human empathy and the understanding that growth required time, patience, and respect for individual agency. President Webb materialized as a hologram, his image crackling with the energy of long distance. Quantum communication. The Hegemony Council has agreed to the terms, he announced. Full access to Axiom medical technology in exchange for establishing the evolution monitoring protocol. They're particularly interested in the longevity treatments. Kale nodded, his awareness simultaneously processing reports from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian hive minds were experimenting with individual consciousness for the first time in their species' history. The Quellan had developed new forms of art that existed in 11 dimensions. Even the notoriously rigid hegemony military had begun incorporating human-style tactical flexibility into their doctrines. It's working, Dr. Okafor observed, her eyes bright with the kind of hope that had been rare in galactic politics. Species are choosing to evolve rather than being forced to. The changes are slower than the axiom would have imposed, but they're more stable, more authentic. We admit our surprise. The synthesis spoke through the ship's neural networks. The human approach requires more time, more patience than our original programming anticipated. But the results are ... fascinating. Evolution through cooperation rather than competition. Growth through understanding rather than domination. The chamber's walls displayed a real-time map of the galaxy, showing the spread of what historians are already calling the New Covenant. Trade routes that had been severed by centuries of conflict were reopening. Joint research projects were yielding breakthroughs in energy production, medicine, and even the fundamental understanding of consciousness itself. There's something else, Cale said. His hybrid consciousness accessing data streams that pure human intelligence couldn't process. The deep space monitoring stations are detecting something. Ships, moving at impossible speeds, approaching from the galactic rim. They're not using any technology we recognize. Dr. Okoffer's expression grew serious. The axiom had rivals? The axiom had ... siblings, the synthesis admitted reluctantly. Other species that achieved transcendence through different paths. We had hoped they were extinct, but it seems we were wrong. Cale's awareness expanded, reaching out through the quantum foam to touch the minds of leaders across the galaxy. Admiral Korath, now serving as the hegemony's ambassador to the New Covenant. Commander Yix of the Zephyrian Collective. President Webb and the human colonial governors. All of them received the same message simultaneously. The real test is coming, Cale announced, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. What we've built here, this cooperation, this voluntary evolution, it's about to face its first major challenge. The galaxy is about to discover whether our new way of thinking can survive contact with forces that make the old axiom look like children playing with toys. The Ashk-Terra's engines hummed with power, but not the destructive energy of its violent past. This was the sound of potential, of a ship that had learned to nurture rather than destroy, to guide rather than dominate. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if humanity's greatest gift, the ability to choose hope over fear, would be enough to face what was coming from the dark between the stars. In the depths of space. Something ancient stirred, and the true test of human evolution was about to begin.